So we're now going to explore some more complex problems involving indices. Before we do that, we will review two of the rules that you have seen in previous lessons. So the first one is where we have negative indices. So for instance, if we have 4 to the negative 1, we should now know that that means 1/4. If we have 3 to the negative 2, we know that that means 1/9, because we know that 3 squared is equal to 9, so 3 to the negative 2 is the reciprocal, 1/9. So we know that if you take a number or a term and you raise it to a negative index like this, it is the reciprocal of the number or the term raised to the positive index. So x to the negative n is 1/x to the n. We also saw previously how you can work out a fractional index. And we learnt, for instance, that if you work out 4 to the power of a half, that's equal to the square root of 4, which is equal to 2. If you work out 27 to the power of a third, well, that means we're working out the cube root of 27, which equals 3. So in general, we learnt that a power half means take the square root. A power third means take the cube root. And a power 1/n, or an index 1/n, means we take the nth root. We'll be making use of both those rules separately, and we'll be looking at what happens when we combine some of these rules in today's lesson. So really important that we remember these concepts before we move on and progress to more complex examples. So what we're going to do first of all, before we progress to the more complex questions, you are going to practice some examples based on the rules you learned about in the previous lesson, which we have just recapped. The examples will come up on the screen. Pause the video, have a go at the questions, and then unpause and check your answers. So here are your 14 questions. Have a go at answering them. Right, let's quickly check through the answers to these questions. 5 to the negative 2, 1/25. You know that 5 squared is 25, 5 to the negative 2 is the reciprocal, which is 1/25. 2 to the negative 1, that's a half. 4 to the negative 2, 1/16. 9 to the negative 2, 1/81. 2 to the negative 3, 1/8. 2 to the negative 4, 1/16. 7 to the negative 2, 1/49. 25 to the power of a half, the square root of 25 is 5. 4 to the half, the square root of 4 is 2. 100 to the half, 10. 27 to the third, 3. 8 to the power of a third, 3. 1 to the power of a half, 1. 1 to the power of any value is always 1. And 64 to the power of a third, the cube root of 64, not the square root of 64, which is 4. Remember, the square root of 64, or 64 to the half, is 8. So let's start off first of all at the easy level. We're going to work out the answers to 3 questions. First of all, 25 to the power of a half. Do you write down the answer to that? Then 64 to the power of a half. And then finally 8 to the power of a third. Pause the video, take a minute, write down the answers to these 3 questions. Did you get it right? 25 to the power of a half is 5, 64 to the power of a half is 8, and 8 to the power of a third is 2. So now, let's extend these to some slightly more complex questions. What do you think the answer to 25 to the negative half is? Now you can use the answer above to help you. 25 to the half gives you an answer of 5, the square root of 25. And all this negative here does is it means take the reciprocal. So the answer to 25 to the negative a half is the reciprocal of the answer to 25 to the half, so it's 1/4. fifth. Can we now work out the answer to 64 to the power of negative a half? Now again, we know 64 to the power of a half is 8, and we know that this negative here means reciprocal. So 64 to the power of negative a half is 1 over 8. Now, based on these ideas, see if you can write down the value of 8 to the negative a third. Did you get it right? Yes, it's a half. It's the reciprocal of 8 to the power of a third. Now, this is fantastic because what we've done is we've combined fractional and negative powers together, which has allowed us to answer some more complex questions. So it's your turn now. I'm going to write down a few examples, and what I would like you to do is see if you can evaluate each of them. We'll do one further example together just to make sure everybody's comfortable with this, and then you're going to have a go by yourself. So I want to work out the answer to 100 to the power of negative a half. Now, to help me think about it, I'll write down the answer to 100 to the power of a half. So make the question simpler. What's 100 to the power of a half? Well, it's the square root of 100, which is 10. So the answer to the question above, what's 100 to the negative a half? It's the reciprocal, so it's 1/10. So you can make life easier by answering the easier question first. So your questions will pop up in a minute. Have a go at them. So here are your questions. Press pause, have a go at working each of them out, and then check your answers afterwards. So let's check our answers. So 36 to the power of negative a half. Well, I know that 36 to the power of a half is the square root of 36, which is 6. So 36 to the negative a half is 1 over 6. 27 to the power of negative a third. Well, I know that 27 to the power of a third is the cube root of 27, which is 3. So 27 to the power of negative a third is the reciprocal, so it's 1/3. Question 4. 4 to the power of negative a half. 4 to the power of a half is the square root of 4, which is 2. So 4 to the negative a half is the reciprocal, which is a half. Moving on to question 5. 16 to the power of negative a half. Well, 16 to the power of a half is the square root of 16, which is 4. 16 to the negative a half is a quarter. What about question 6? 16 to the power of negative a quarter. That means the fourth root of 16, but also the reciprocal. Well, make the question easier. What's 16 to the power of a quarter? The fourth root of 16 is 2. So 16 to the power of negative a quarter is equal to the reciprocal of that, which is a half. And finally, 32 to the power of negative a fifth. Well, 32 to the power of a fifth means the fifth root of 32. So a number multiplied by itself up to 5 times, giving you an answer of 32. The fifth root of 32 is 2, and then taking the reciprocal of that, we get an answer of a half. So, based on what we've just done, it's a good opportunity for us to try a little challenge with these sorts of questions. So, we're going to see if we can work out what the answer to a quarter to the power of negative a half is. So, always make the question easier for yourself. What's a quarter to the power of positive a half? Well, that means the square root of 1/4, which means we can square root the numerator and square root the denominator. The square root of 1 is 1, the square root of 4 is 2. So the answer to a quarter to the power of positive a half gives me an answer of a half. So if I now want to work out a quarter to the negative a half, I want to take the reciprocal of this answer over here. So it's 2 over 1, or simply 2. Let's see if we can have a look at another example. 4/9 to the power of negative a half. So again, we're going to start off by working out 4/9 raised to a half, which means the square root of 4/9, which means root 4 over root 9, which is 2/3. So the answer to 4/9 to the positive a half is 2/3. So what is 4/9 to the negative a half? It is the reciprocal, which is of course 3/2. See if you can have a go at the next one yourself. You've got to work out 8/27 to the power of -1/3. Pause the video, have a go at it, and then check your answer. So let's work this out. We're going to start off by working out 8/27 raised to the positive 1/3, which means the cube root of 8/27. Now that means I have to cube root 8, which gives me 2, and cube root 27, which gives me 2/3. So 8/27 to the positive 1/3 is 2/3. If I want to work out 8/27 to the negative 1/3, let's take the reciprocal, which is 3/2. So we've looked at some easier examples. Let's now build up our questions. So again, we're going to start with some examples, see how we can work these out, and then you're going to have a go at some questions on your own. So the first example I'm going to have a look at is this. We want to be able to evaluate 27 to the power of 2/3. Now look at that. The numerator of the index is no longer 1. We're not just working out 27 to the third, we're working out 27 to the power of 2/3. Again, make the question easier for yourself. What's 27 to the power of 1/3? We know it means the cube root of 27, which is just 3. Now, 27 to the 2/3 then requires us to work out this power, which is the square power, which means we take 3, which is 27 to the power of 1/3, and we square it to give us an answer of 9. Now, why does that actually work? Well, you may remember one of your laws of indices, which says if you have a power of a power, you can multiply them together. So I can split up 27 to the 2/3 as 27 to the third, then raised to the power of 2, because 2 times by 1/3 gives me 2/3. That means I've clearly got to work out what 27 to the third is first of all, which we know is the cube root, which gives me 3, and then following that I work out the power 2, which gives me my answer of 9 up over here. So we work out the denominator part of the power first, and then the numerator. Let's try another example. So I'm going to evaluate 64 to the power of 2/3. Now again, let's start with the denominator power. 64 to the power of 1/3 means the cube root of 64, which is equal to 4. Think about it. 4 multiplied by 4 is 64. So how do I then work out 64 to the 2/3? I take that 4 that I've just worked out and I raise it to the numerator in the power, which is 2, which gives me an answer of 16. Let's try another one. 81 to the power of 3/4. So denominator power first of all, 81 to the power of 1/4. So I'm looking at this denominator here. 81 to the power of 1/4 means the fourth root of 81. It means I'm looking for a number multiplied by itself again, multiplied by itself another time, which gives me an answer of 81. Can you think what that number is? It's 3. 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27, times 3 again is 81. So 81 to the power of 1/4 is 3. That's the fourth root of 81. I now need to work out the numerator power, which means I need to take this 3 and I need to raise it to that power, and that gives me 3 to the 3, which is 27. One more example. If you want, pause the video, have a go at it yourself. You're going to have a go at working out 8 to the power of 2/3. So 8 to the power of 1/3 first of all. So again, focusing in on this denominator power here, the cube root of 8, which is 2. Now let's work out the numerator power, which gives me the 2 I've just worked out and squares it which works out to be an answer of 4. So, can we apply what we've just learnt to a short challenge? Yes, we can. So, we're going to work out a quarter raised to the power of 3/2. So, where to start with this? Well, we're going to work out what is a quarter raised to the power of a half. So you can see I'm dealing with the denominator here, first of all. Well, we know that means the square root of a quarter, which we know means a half. We worked it out previously. So now we have to take that 1/2 and we have to raise it to the numerator of this power, which is 3. Now what does that mean? It means a half multiplied by a half multiplied by a half, which gives me an answer of 1 in the numerator and 2 times 2 times 2, 8 in the denominator. Quite a tricky question. Let's try a second example. We've got 8/27 raised to the power of 2/3. So stop and think about the denominator here first of all. 8/27, you want to raise it to the power of a third, which means you need to cube root both the 8 and the 27. The cube root of 8 is 2, the cube root of 27 is 3, the answer is 2/3. Now take that 2/3 and raise it to the power of 2. So 2/3 raised to the power of 2. Now this means we need to take 2/3 and we need to square it, which means multiply by itself, multiply the numerators, which gives us 4, multiply the denominators, which gives us 9. The answer is 4/9. One last question. You can pause the video and have a go at this one yourself. 27/64 raised to the power of 2/3. Pause the video, have a go yourself. So, let's check our answer. Start with 27/64 and raise it to the power of a third, so deal with the denominator. Now we know a power third means cube root. We know the cube root of 27 is 3. The cube root of 64 is 4. So the answer to 27/64 to the power of a third is 3/4. We now need to deal with the numerator power, so that's power 2. So we need to take 3/4 and we need to square it. So that is 3/4 multiplied by 3/4, which gives us 9/16. And well done if you got that answer. So now we're going to move on to the trickiest examples. So let's just quickly summarise the sorts of questions we've seen so far. We looked at examples where we have, for instance, 27 to the power of negative a third. We've now looked at examples where we've got questions like 27 to the 2/3. But where we're aiming to look at now is what about 27 to the power of negative 2/3? So we know how to do this, we know how to do this. We're going to learn how to do this. So not only do we have a numerator value and a denominator value to deal with, we've also got a negative number involved as well. So, as ever, let's start with some examples and think about them carefully. And the example that we're going to start with is indeed 27 to the power of negative 2/3. So, break the question down bit by bit. Start with 27 to the power of a third, a really easy question. 27 to the power of a third is the cube root of 27, which is simply 3. Now make the question a little bit trickier. 27 to the power of 2/3. Well, we know that 2 here means square. So it means take this 3 and square it, which gives us 9. And then all that's left is to now work out 27 to the negative 2/3, which means we take the answer we've got for 27 to the 2/3 and we take the reciprocal, so the answer is 1/9. So let's stop and break down the stages of what happened here. We first of all dealt with the denominator, in the power and the index. We then dealt with the numerator. Tick, we did that. And we then dealt with the negative. In the index. Now, what do the three things do? The denominator in the index was, in this case, a cube root. It could be a different kind of root. The numerator in the index, in this case, meant take a square, because it was a 2 in the numerator. And the negative in the index, of course, means take the reciprocal. And follow that pattern. If you deal with the denominator first of all, then deal with the numerator, and finally then take the reciprocal at the end, you will always be able to work out questions similar to this one. Let's try another example together. So we're going to evaluate 64 to the power of negative 2/3. So what did we say first of all? We said deal with the denominator first of all, looking at the list just above. So 64 to the power of 1/3. That's the cube root of 64, which we know is 4. Now let's deal with the numerator in the power. So we're working out 64 to the 2/3. Well, we know that the 2 in the power means square, so it means take this value here and square it, so we get an answer of 16. And finally, we're answering the whole question, which is 64 to the negative 2/3, which means take the previous answer we had and take the reciprocal, so it's 1/16. So the final answer to the question, 64 to the negative 2/3, is 1/16. So 2 further examples are going to come up. You're going to have a go at each of these yourself. So pause the video once you've written the questions down and have a go. So question 3, you're going to see if you can work out 81 to the power of negative 3/4. And question 4, you're going to see if you can work out 16 to the power of negative 3/4. So question 3, let's have a look at our answer for this. 81 to the power of negative 3/4. So we're going to do this in careful stages, starting with 81 to the power of 1/4, the denominator. So 81 to the quarter means the 4th root of 81, which by now we hopefully know means 3. 81 to the power of 3/4, the numerator. Now we know that numerator being a power of 3 means that we cube, so that gives us 3 cubed, which is 27. And then finally, 81 to the power of negative 3/4 means take our previous answer to 81 to the 3/4 and take the reciprocal, it's 1/27, which we can leave as a fraction. Now, turning our attention to question 4, 16 to the negative 3/4. So let's start with 16 to the 1/4, the 4th root of 16. Well, that is 2. Why is it 2? Because 2 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 2 is equal to 16. What about 16 to the power of 3/4? Well, it means take the previous value and cube it. What is 2 cubed? It's 8. Now, 16 to the power of negative 3/4, well, take this value here and take the reciprocal of it. It's 1/8. And there's our final answer. So, are we ready to look at a challenge at this level? I think we are. So, we are going to have a look at whether we can work out 4/9 to the power of negative 3/2. So, just as we have above, let's work out the 3 stages. 4/9 to the power of 1/2. So, that means the square root of 4/9, which we know means square root the 4 to get 2, square root the 9 to get 3. Now, 4/9 to the power of 3/2. So I'm dealing with the positive version of the index, the numerator part here. Now, this 3 here means cube, so it means take this answer here, 2/3, and cube it, which means 2/3 multiplied by 2/3 multiplied by 2/3. What's that equal to? It's equal to 8/27. And to finish off, what about the negative? So we're working out 4/9 to the power of negative 3 over 2. It means take this value that we worked out, take the reciprocal, it's 27 over 8. A lot to think about there. I'm going to write down one further challenge example, which is 8/27 to the power of negative 2/3. Pause the video, have a go at this one. So let's check your answer. Starting with 8/27 to the power of a third, so the cube root here, so that's 2 over 3. Now let's deal with 8/27 to the power of 2/3, and we know that 2 in the power there means square this answer that we have here. So that's 2/3 squared, which is 4/9. And then to finish off, of course, we need to deal with the negative in the index. So 8/27 to the power of negative 2/3. Well, let's take the answer we had previously, take its reciprocal, 9/4. Very well done if you work that out. So we're going to finish this off with a quick summary. If we need to evaluate a power like this, 8 to the power of negative 2/3, there are 3 steps that we need to take. Step 1, we need to deal with the denominator, which of course means we take a root. So we work out 8 to the power of a third, which is the cube root of 8, which is 2. Step 2, we deal with the numerator, which is going to be some sort of power. In this case, it's power 2. So we're working out 8 to the power of 2/3. So we take our previous answer and we apply the numerator power, which in this case is a power 2, which means we square. So 2 is squared to give us 4. And the third step is to deal with the negative in the power, which of course means we are taking a reciprocal. So that's 8 to the power of negative 2/3. We take our previous answer, take the reciprocal, it's a quarter. Make sure you've written down this example and the 3 steps in how you deal with a question like this very carefully. You're going to finish off by working out some examples yourself, which will come up on the screen. You'll need to pause them so you can see the questions, and then afterwards the answers will come up so you can check your working. So here are the 3 questions you are going to complete in your books. Have a go and then check your answers. Do not use a calculator for any of these questions. You must work them out without a calculator. The answers are going to come up in a minute, so pause, work out the questions and then check your answers.